Battle of the Spider-Editors, Tales from the Marvel Bullpen. That's Danny's name.
Well, actually, I was an assistant editor.
Well, leave, please. Every person here has a bio that would take 20 minutes to go through. So what I'm going to do is going to let each person introduce themselves in the way.
Well, that would take a lot longer.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
That's true.
you can't ramble.
So let's start on the other end with Keith.
Oh, why? Okay. Hi, Keith Williams. Been working in comics for over 40 years now.
So you're a new guy.
Yeah. Worked for these two gentlemen right here, as a matter of fact, on the Spider-Man books.
We were lucky.
Yeah. Hey. Oh, gee. Well, and also was an assistant editor myself on the Spider-Man books when I was at Marvel, working with Jim Owsley at the time, becoming the first all-black editorial team at Marvel, and went on to being an inker. Worked as a Romita Raider, art corrections, things like that, and inking was my thing for Marvel, DC, lots of different places, but especially Spider-Man, because I worked on Web of Spider-Man. This gentleman over here, for about 5 years. I think that's
Okay.
now. Yeah.
This is apparently your fashion model now. I'm going to strike, like Madonna, I will strike a pose. A lot of people compare me to Madonna very often.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I'm Danny Fingeroth. I edited Spider-Man in 2 different periods, in the 80s and in the 90s. Jim and I always did. Jim had the highest selling individual Spidey comic, but who sold more total Spidey comics? It's hard to say. Okay, then it's me. I wrote Web of Spider-Man. I wrote Deadly Foes of Spider-Man. I wrote Darkhawk. I wrote Dazzler. I edited a lot when the big 90s explosion came.
He exploded.
I exploded. We were putting out like 17 or 18 Spider-Man related titles a month. Every one of them a classic.
In some sense or another.
In some sense or another.
I hate.
These are the jokes, folks. So a lot of them are pretty good, especially considering we put out about 1,000 a month. I worked with Eric Larson, Mark Bagley, Tom DeFalco, Ron Friends, Keith Williams, Rick Parker, Bob Sharon, you name it, Alex Saviuk,
Selba Simmer, yes.
Simmer.
Oh my gosh.
You name them.
So I've been following.
I worked with them. I'm on speaking terms with many of them, including Dawn.
Yeah, there you go.
DeMatteis. J.M. DeMatteis. Bill Madlow.
Jerry
Roger
Conway.
Stern. I did work with Conway a little bit. Roy Thomas.
Stan Lee.
Stan the Man Lee. Yes. We put out a lot of Spidey comics. Some of them were controversial. We got some letters about the Clone Saga. Some people didn't like it. Maximum Carnage. Anyway, a lot of tons of Spider-Man. In the years since, I've written books about comics, many on my table out there. I wrote a biography of Stan Lee that people seem to think is actually, pardon the what's going on? Maybe you'll pardon the expression, fair and balanced. Anyway, my new book is about Jack Ruby. It has nothing to do with Spider-Man. Not Jack Kirby. Jack clearly R.B. Oswald on TV movie. So we'll get more into stuff. Jim Salicrup.
This will be shocking to Danny Fingeroth, or maybe to some of you even. It was to me. I was on a panel at New York Comic Con, and the moderator pointed out that I'm the 6th writer to regularly write a Spider-Man comic book title. Were you aware of that?
I was not.
And it was Spidey Superstar.
Yes.
You know, Gene Thomas was before me, and then all the other amazing Spider-Man.
So did you invent the Thanos copter?
Yes, and much to Jim Starlin's regret. But And I don't have one of them. They made toys out of
They did,
that.
really?
Yes, and they gave them away.
Do
at
you
St.
guys know what they're talking about? They may not know about the Thanos copter. Yeah, we're gonna project.
Hello. Does that work? No. And
It's not an amplifying.
I know it's just I'll try. Basically, I've been involved with Spider-Man in one way or another since for 50 years. When I first started writing Spidey Super Stories, years later, I was the editor on Spider-Man between some of Danny's runs as editor. During that, I got Peter Parker married to Mary Jane. Raven went on his last hunt. Venom was created for the 300th issue.
Is Craven still dead? Or they brought him back to life yet?
I think he has. Yeah, you know, that's how it goes. I just said it was his last hunt.
No, I know. I just
Yes, no, yes.
Yes, no. Okay, yeah.
The man is
Definitely, maybe.
recently, I think last year was he wrote Craven's Lost Hunt, which came out last year. I'm sure you all read it, and that was it. And then since then I eventually after 20 years left Marvel, went on to work at Topps Comics as editor-in-chief. Then from there went to work with Stan Lee on the West Coast. That is his .com, Stan Lee Media. From there, I had my own company for about 20 years called Paper Cuts, where we did graphic novels for kids. We sold it a couple of years ago to Mad Cave Studios, and now I'm just sitting at home reading all the books by Danny Fingeroth.
Did you work in L.A. without a driver's license?
Yeah, I never learned to drive.
Wow.
In LA, wow.
That's amazing.
Actually, when I went out there, Stan Lee had called me on a Friday, hoping I could come out and work for him on a Monday. And I said, I'm in New York. I have to find a place to live. I have to make arrangements, et cetera, et cetera. So he gave me a couple of weeks, and I was happy. I managed to wrap everything up I needed to do in a week and a half. But on that day, I wound up breaking my ankle. So I figured that's it. I can't go out to LA now. But Stan was so wonderful. He held the job for me. I went out on crutches, so not only couldn't I drive, I couldn't walk.
Wow.
But I had a great time working. Stan is like a surrogate father to me, and I love him. And that was an incredible experience. When I left Marvel earlier, big regret is I'm going to miss. What are the odds I'll ever be able to work with Stan Lee again? He's like going to be with Marvel forever. So it worked out great.
We do have Stanley questions later on, so we'll circle back to that. Hi, everybody. I'm Roy Schwartz. I'm the co-producer of CosmicCon, so thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And, this panel is really about me. You just don't know it yet. And so I'm a pop culture comic book historian and critic. I used to be a long-time CNN contributor. I am world famous in my hometown for the book, Is Superman Circumcised? And that's the real title.
Not to be confused with Superman on the couch. Like
It's like his is the original, the Old Testament, and I'm like the sequel.
The much more daring
Title for sure. The content.
And do you answer that question?
So you know what? And we're gonna segue a little bit out of Spider-Man here. People ask me.
He avoided that question.
Listen, the book isn't really about Superman circumcision. It's a funny title, but people have either asked me about it or just told me dirty jokes so many times that I've come up with an answer. And you must be wondering what this answer is. I'm glad you asked me. I will tell you. And that is, on planet Krypton, if you know the mythology, his dad was Jor-El, and he was born Kal-El, so he must have been circumcised by Moy-El. Thank you. I'll be here all day.
That was very good.
I was going to do a spit take, but I didn't want to mess up the microphone.
And you won an award for the weirdest title of.
So there is a real award for oddest book title in the world, and my book won in 2021.
So not just national, the entire world.
International award, yeah. And I have a surprise Spider-Man connection. Danny, I don't even know if you remember this.
Let's see.
So do you guys remember that in 1996, there was a Spider-Man animated series? It was the first one with CGI in it.
All right.
So in 96, 97, they had this big campaign with a huge toy line, and it was international. And they had shows in malls with guys doing zip line and Spider-Man costumes and all these. I was one of those Spider-Man. I played before Tobey Maguire in the tight because I'm not skinnier after that.
Wow.
And I did a zip line in a mall and hung out with kids. It was awesome.
I have a Peter Parker thing going.
Is that a compliment? Not a compliment? I don't know. But
That's a good thing.
Peter Parker.
Yeah.
Peter Parker.
He's a handsome guy.
Peter Parker.
the John Romita, I'll take that. Yeah, exactly. So that's my connection to Spider-Man. And with that high note, we will segue into questions. And my first question for this esteemed panel is, how did you get to work on Spider-Man? What is your origin story? Let's start with Keith.
Oh, it's really interesting. The first job I did at Marvel, I was doing background inking. At the time, Don Perlin got me the job, and the first background inking job I did was on Spider-Man book, and it was Marvel Team Up. I think Jim Mooney was penciling it, and Mike Esposito was inking it. So I was working for Mike as background inker. I would ink everything other than the figures. So that was my first experience with working with Spider-Man.
So that was before you had the staff job.
Yeah, before the staff job and all that.
So how did you segue?
Yes.
No. So how did you segue?
Into Spider-Man.
Co-editing.
Into co-editing? Into being, good grief. So much stuff happened after that, besides, doing like a ton of other background inking work. And then finding out that John Romita was going to have this Romita Raider thing going on with art correction. So I weaseled my way into that. Became the first Raider. There. Yeah, I was the first one.
Wow.
Yeah, because I overheard that they were going to do that. And the moment I heard that, I went right into his office and said, I would like to do that.
So there's wins, right?
Yep. So, so I did that. And while that was happening, that was when Jim Owsley walked up to me and said, hey, would you like to be my assistant editor on Spider-Man? I just got the job. Really? So that's how it worked out. I was in the right place, I guess, at the right time to go and get that job. So I ended up being an assistant editor on the Spider-Man books for 9 months. That's about as long as I could take it, because all the artwork was going through and stuff, and I really wanted to work on the art and not be just looking at it and overseeing it and stuff like that. And so I had to move on. And that's when I started doing my inking gigs. And then Spider-Man just happened to come up again, and for Web of Spider-Man and working with Alex Sobiek, and it was like Spider-Man's been my life. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's been everywhere.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
See, I was on staff. I had started there. Anybody here born in 1977 who was alive? You were around then? Anybody? Oh, okay. In 1977, when I was like 4.5 years old, I was hired to be Larry Lieber's assistant. Larry was, and is, Stan Lee's kid brother. He's only 93, and he's about to publish his first prose novel. It's called Chirps, and it'll be coming out very soon. So keep your eyes open. I'm helping Larry progress to get it out. He's working on the next novel.
We'll put it on the Cosmicon channel, so you guys will know where to find it.
Larry hired me, and I kind of then ended up in what was called the British department, where we put out a lot of mostly reprints, some new stuff, including Captain Britain, but mostly reprint material. And I caught up on a lot of comics, as I loved comics, especially Marvel, as a kid and a teenager that I hadn't read for years. And suddenly I'm in this kind of ancillary department working with a creator of comics history, like at the desk next to me. And so eventually I got into the mainstream editorial department. I was, well, they moved the British department to England, weirdly enough. They thought that maybe guys from, maybe British comics should not be made by guys from the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. Maybe actual British people should make them.
You're forgetting the U's and the vowels.
Yes, well, that's what we did. We would change elevator to lift. We changed color to color. A lot. So I ended up in the mainstream editorial department. And then when they hired Louise Simonson, who was then Louise Jones from Warren, I became her assistant. And a couple of years later, Tom DeFalco was promoted to be the executive editor under Jim Shooter, and Tom had been editing the Spider-Man book. So really, I was the next in line of the assistants to be promoted, and that slot came open, and then that's when I really got to appreciate Spider-Man. I'd read, I never had Amazing Fantasy 15, but I had Amazing Spider-Man 1 off the newsstand. I'm not sure if it was 10 or 12 cents.
12.
It was 12 by that. So highway robbery. That's a 20% increase. So then I really got to appreciate who Peter Parker was and who Spider-Man was, and in a way that I hadn't just as a casual reader. I was a Fantastic Four fan and Daredevil and Iron Man, and I liked Spider-Man well enough, but I really got to understand the character. And so I edited for a couple of years, and then went freelance, and then came back several years later. But that was the beginning of my relationship, and then along the way, I ended up writing some different Spider-Man comics as well.
Well, and I started Marvel when I was 15, so I did all sorts of things. I wound up, I too was an editor in the British department, which was great training. And I wrote Spidey Super Stories, like I mentioned before. I had a previous run editing a whole bunch of, almost like a quarter of the whole line. It was Avengers, Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Fantastic Four, Marvel 2-in-1, the X-Men, and many more. And it was a lot. And I think at some point it was like, oh, let me do some easier stuff. And I wound up editing Marvel Age ultimately for 18 years. I freelanced it, edited a bunch of titles, and still came into the Marvel offices. I wasn't part of the main editorial team, but I was there and doing all sorts of odd projects, which I enjoyed. Everything from the Marvel toilet paper to, Kool-Aid Man. And I was just having a great time. So at one point, I guess when Jim Owsley was leaving as editor of the Spider-Man line, Shooter asked if I'd be interested, and what the heck? Who doesn't want to? That was like the one title I hadn't been editing, the last time, and I was very excited about it, and jumped at the chance. It was wonderful.
Cool.
I'm really curious to know, before we get to Stanley and all that stuff, if you have a specific storyline or specific issue that stands out as something you're particularly proud of you worked on.
Oh, good grief. It's a softball question.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
But there's so many to choose.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think one was when Betty Brant was in some kind of a weird kind of cult for like 3 issues.
Yeah, the Peter David wrote those.
The Peter David. Yeah, right. And then
That's
yeah, that one was really something.
try to phrase your answers as a question.
Thank you, Alex. But yeah, that's the one that got me when I was working on the Spider-Man titles.
So do you know what she actually got misses?
Yes. Yes. That's right.
That's small cover.
Yeah, exactly.
That is a really good question, because there's so many different. Am I proud of something that made some kind of important social comment, or I'm proud of something that sold a lot. But the thing that came to my mind, I don't think anybody says that. It's weird. Is that I put together the DeFalco and Friends team. I had worked with Ron. Actually, maybe my first editorial experience with Spider-Man was when I was editing Kazar. I was Louise's assistant. I was editing Kazar the Savage, and wanting to raise sales, we guest starred Spider-Man in several issues. And Ron drew it. Well, it was written by Bruce Jones, who was terrific. But at a certain point, people came, people went, and Tom and Ron. Tom had worked as Ron's editor, like a Marvel team up, and they seemed to have a good rapport. And I put them together, and that was their chemistry turned out to be so terrific that they basically are each other's favorite creative partner, and they've done stuff for the past 40 plus years together, and they really have, you hear all these stories about creative, writers and artists who butt heads and who hate each other and stop talking, and, and they have, they have editors as intermediaries because they can't. Tom and Ron love each other, and they love working together, and they do so in a certain way. I'm really, and their run on Amazing Spider-Man is looked back on very, very fondly by fans. So that's the top of my head answer to that question.
I'll avoid the question for a second just to say that I, too, was able to get Tom DeFalco together with Ron Wilson on Marvel 2 and 1. And they were a pretty good team, too. But one of the things when I look back, so many of the things in my career, and not too surprising to the people who know me, were actually mistakes. Things that, we weren't planning it that way. When I was editing X-Men, the issues of, my last one was where Jean Grey lived. And then that was redone by Shooter and Claremont and Louise Jones, and she died. And that became a classic.
Phoenix, not Louise.
No, Dark Phoenix. But I think she's back to anyhow. So one of the things that was completely unexpected to me was, I'm just an editor. Stan Lee is the co-creator of Spider-Man. So one day I'm just in the hallway at the hallowed halls of Mighty Marvel, and Jim Shooter asked me, he says, Stan just called him, Stan Lee, the co-creator of Spider-Man, he's thinking of getting Peter Parker married to Mary J.
In the strip.
Yeah, in the comic strip. Well, he wants to do it in both. And he doesn't want to do it if we don't want to have it done. So in other words, Stan Lee indirectly is asking my permission for him to marry Peter Parker to Mary Jane. And this was at a time where I was just coming on Spider-Man. I had a few ideas of things I wanted to do, go back to the red and blue costume for one. And, but, I figured, oh gosh, this is outrageous. I mean, if he wants to do it, I'm prone to, agree with Stan, let him do what he wants to do. But I thought it was also another great idea, something that I knew would be controversial. Like even John Romita was dead set against it. It's what killed Lil Abner. So it was a lot of people were. But here's the big, gigantic mistake I made, is I forgot that anyone who worked with Stan Lee for any period of time, is he's one of the most impatient guys in the world because he does everything quick and rapid. He would write, 2 comics a night or something. It was just, we would run instead of walk. He was just all about getting things done and quickly. So I thought this was just, what do you think of this idea? The initial first step, and then we'll have planning meetings, and we figure out, the best way to handle the publicity, all the marketing, all like down the road away. We still have then the next thing I ever heard about it, Jim came to me and said, well, it's happening June 14th, and which was like just a couple of months in the future. We already had comics that were scheduled to be coming out in that time period where, at that point in the comics, Peter wasn't even seeing Mary Jane anymore. So we had to like pull all sorts of things back, change things, it was far from ideal, and we were, struggling to make it happen. Michelini was writing the annual, was where it was going to happen, and Shooter was having, we were coinciding. It was the first time I'm aware of that a character who appeared both in a comic strip and a comic book, got married at the same time. As well as in Shea Stadium, where they had an actor and an actress,
and Stan
officiating the wedding. So it was a big deal, and it was. But it's not the way at all I would have loved to handle it. I would have liked to have years, just playing with Peter and Mary Jane. Will they or won't they, have, playing off that.
Did Stan need to do something to boost circulation on the paper? Was that part of it?
I just think he felt, it was something he wanted to do, and so he did. But it turned out, I enjoyed it. We made the best of it. We did all sorts of things. It became an element in Craven's Last Hunt when Peter Parker, Spider-Man, is buried alive. He's thinking of Mary Jane, reminiscent of the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko issues when Spider-Man's buried under all that rubble. He's thinking of his Aunt May, and he has to, lift it all off him. So I felt, for a character with the premise, the sort of the heart of it is, with great responsibility must come great power. What's more responsible than when being married and all that goes with that? So it was a big deal to me, but maybe I worried about nothing because it all turned out it never happened.
Well, speaking of something that never happened, I was the one. I'm sure all of us have some Stan stories, but I was the one who had to call Stan to tell him we were killing Aunt May. We decided, but as you know, and
wow,
and where is she alive now?
Yeah.
Okay, she got better, but that was the days before.
And she keeps getting younger.
Yes.
But she died again in one of the movies.
Oh, that's right.
Spoilers.
So for some, it was sort of the opposite. We were not, we were asserting our editorial authority. And I think even Stan realized, Stan, who was not getting any younger himself at that point. He's probably younger than I am today, but Stan, I had to call him. He took it well. He didn't, he said, well, she has been at death's door 500 times in the past 30 years. And we want to sell some books. So maybe, and so I don't remember getting, any pushback from Stan. And we then did get to do a bunch of special Remembering Aunt May stories that Stan scripted over Tom's plots. And I think Romita Senior and
beautiful
you worked on them.
Great stuff.
So it was a great source of stories. But my most, I remember when I had just been promoted, and my first go around as Spider-Man editor, we did a Spider-Man annual where Jonah Jameson gets married. There's a lot of, and again, Tom plotted it and Ron drew it, but the arrangement, I think Stan had not scripted a comic book at that point for 12 years. He'd been scripting the newspaper Spider-Man. And the pages come in, and as the editor, I had some issues with some of the scripts, and it's like, what the hell do I do now? Yeah. I mean, probably if I let it go, nobody would have noticed, but I would have noticed. And so I call up, I'm sure I checked with Shooter and said, what He's like, call Stan, he'll be fine. And sure. And I have to say, Stan was probably the most professional person I ever worked with. You know, if he agreed with, oh, that's a big improvement. And if he didn't, no, I don't want to, you know, I think it should stay the way I have it. And here's, you know, I mean, and I, over the years, I worked with him numerous times. That was always his attitude, that he was the freelancer and I was the guy signing the voucher, and he was not going to be a prima donna. But that was totally surreal that first time. Like,
Well, let me add to that is that I think that really means Stan had a lot of respect for you.
No.
Because I don't think he was like that with everyone. I could give you an example, which I enjoyed. When I was at Stanley Media, Stan was a big news. Stan was going to write some comic books for DC. You know, like, just imagine if Stan Lee created Superman, Batman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So Stan was like, you know, taking this very seriously, and he was writing, you know, like, really detailed plots. I mean, I think for one of them, he wrote a 20-page plot.
right.
And they sent it over to DC, and I think Mike Carlin was the editor, and Michael Uslan was the one who sort of came up with the idea of Stan going to DC in the first place. And so I remember I was in Stan's office because I was going to have a meeting with him, but then DC called, and he took the call, and Stan was his ultimate cool self. He had his feet up on his desk, he'll be sitting back, and, you know, I could tell that Mike and the two Mikes at DC were having the same sort of, you know, internal struggle. Like, how do you tell Stanley what to do? But in this case, Stan he wasn't budging. He was saying, like, his answer to them, you're calling this, what if Stan Lee had created blah, 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 blah. Not, what if Mike Carlin created? So they didn't know what to say to that. And Stan, like, you know, got what he wanted. They weren't going to change a thing. He hung up. We continued our meeting. But I think, you know, it's a sign that he really respected what you were saying, whereas maybe not so much in the other case. Nothing against the two Mikes.
So well, I want to ask, so Keith, you were the assistant editor.
Yes.
So you got to watch idiots like me and Jim and the other Jim make ridiculous decisions. Did you ever go, what the hell are they doing?
Well, you know, I was partially scared to death. Being in that position of, you know, like being a Spider-Man, you know, like editor, assistant editor and stuff. As a matter of fact, I even remember it was one time that I went out with you and Tom DeFalco to a lunch. I took you guys out to lunch because Jim Owsley was on vacation or something like that. And we were discussing, I believe it was the aftermath of the Beyond.
Wow.
The golden
notebook thing.
Yes, the golden
Notebook. Oh,
the Daily Bugle.
Yeah.
building.
Right.
And we were trying to decide how, you know, what to do with that, and
Wow.
that because of the weight of gold and the realistic, you know, that would collapse on itself.
Because everything in the comic book has to be
Be
realistic.
real, yes. And Beyond made the Bugle gold. So I actually sat down for a few seconds as an editor and discussed it with Tom and Danny.
Because I was writing web at the time.
That's right. Which was that.
So did you feel like a lot of pressure?
I felt power.
But
For a few moments.
But you had great responsibility.
Yes, I did.
Imagine the waiter or waitress listening into this conversation of these guys.
Well, so I didn't abuse the Marvel credit card. So
What did we use?
I'm trying to remember. I can't remember that.
There was only one editor who ever discovered the limits of the Marvel. I won't mention the name, but only one editor in the history of Marvel ever discovered, you know, what limit there was from the credit card company. You know,
It was amazing, those lunches.
That's when different times.
Yes. Very different times.
So I'm trying to think, one of my questions was, what is your favorite Stan Lee story? Which seems requisite in a Spider-Man bullpen panel, but I don't know if you talk about him so much, if you already told that. So do you have another really cool Stan Lee story?
Just I was friends with Ron Wilson, and Ed Hannigan, Keith Pollard. At 5'7", when you guys were at 575, I would go up there. You guys did not know me, but I was up there like almost every Friday. I don't know how that happened, but I was lucky. And they had me organizing their comic books that they had in a file cabinet. And while I was doing that, who sticks his head in around the corner but Stan Lee? And he just goes, "Oh, hello." And I'm the only guy there. And I'm like looking at him, fan thing, all. And he goes, "Oh, did you by any chance see Roy Thomas? Is he around?" And oh, no. He went, "Oh, okay." And he pulled his head back out. And that was my first meeting with Stan Lee. Yeah. So that was, that was like my experience. So
The story I hope Jim tells, but I have a favorite. I think Stan was a showman, right? Stan's, I think I once asked Stan if he hadn't been in comics, what would he do? And I think he said be an actor. That's certainly one of his, which is why all the cameos, which he got scale for, Wow. But at 30 years ago, so when I was like 11, my then girlfriend and I took a trip to the West Coast. My mission was to direct the filming of the Spider-Man holodiscs, which I have for sale on my. Oh no, I don't. Never mind. I have other shit for sale. But these Spider-Man holodiscs, which required going after Oxnard. That's before Oxnard was discovered as a fashionable suburb. And a guy named Scott Lee. So it required an actor, playing Scott Lever, who played Spider-Man a lot, to stand on a platform. And then it required a silent movie camera built in 1926 because they had the pinpoint registration to have this guy playing Spider-Man stand on a Lazy Susan to get a 3D. Anyway, what I really went out there for was to network for a new job because Marvel had a restructuring and I wanted to get the hell out. But my then girlfriend and I went out there and we went to dinner with Stan and his wife Joan, who had and Stan was sort of on the outs with Marvel. They were whatever the corporate entity that owned them was trying to force him out, or they like every corporation that buys Marvel, they at some point they go, "Why are we paying this guy? Because he's Stan fucking Lee. That's why."
This was the Perlman era.
This is the Perlman era, yeah.
Oh.
So we went out to dinner, and it was during the mud. There were mudslides. There was severe rains and mudslides, and we were staying in Oxnard. And I'm a New Yorker driving on the LA freeways during a mudslide, which is actually when I drive the best. I'm terrible on a nice day. I'm only good as a driver when there's mudslides. And so Stan and Joan said,
Mrs.
Lee said, "Oh, you can't drive back in this weather. We'll find, you need to stay at a hotel. Let me run expense account." So we said, "Sure." Help. So I have this memory of Stan Lee getting on the phone and phoning around hotels in LA to find us a room, which was just like, hello. I mean, that's just like it's such a thing you do not think of Stan doing. But Stan, would do that for people and would go out of his way. And then he and Joan got in their car and led us down the twisty highway in the Hollywood Hills to the main road, So that's kind of one of my best Stan Lee memories. The one that I was hoping to tell about when he and Steve met up. But if you have another one, then feel free.
I'll tell that one. I had another one, but that's. I mean, there was a point where after the success of Spider-Man #1, which I launched with Todd McFarlane and all that, it's like I sort of felt I was reaching the end of my time at Marvel, and that everything I wanted to do there was culminated in that. I wanted to figure out how to make Spider-Man as successful as possible. And at that point, it was already doing as well as the X-Men titles, which for previous 10 or 20 years, were Marvel's top seller. So I was, I sort of felt like, well, there's nothing really left. I didn't want to be editor-in-chief at Marvel. That just seemed to be like, a very stressful, not very rewarding, having to deal with corporate people. I mean, I love the process of putting comic books together, and as editor-in-chief, you're sort of, supervising everything, but not getting to do the fun part. So I was already looking, for other things, and the potential came up. Tom DeFalco said, we want to do, a new line. Stan has a new character he wants to do, and you seem to get along well with Stan. I mean, like, I don't know who didn't, but I said, would you want to edit this? I said, sure. And we went through a process of trying to find an artist for this. And this was, I think, ultimately, it's what turned into Ravage. But, Stan's original concept, I think we always wanted to be, cutting edge. And in his mind, he was thinking of a Judge Dredd type of, post-apocalyptic future, and where the garbage man reigns supreme, etc. He had an interesting concept. And Tom, bless him, Tom was, I don't think, really paying attention as much to what Stan was looking for. Stan was looking for an artist like Brian Bolland. But Tom was very respectful and wanting to keep a lot of the artists who had been with Marvel for years busy, keeping them busy with lots of work. And so his first suggestion was, Herb Trimpe. He could do it. So Herb came in, he met with Stan. He did some samples. Stan said, I love you, Herb, but this is, not what I'm looking for. Herb wasn't too thrilled about that. And, it's like an awkward position to be in as editor, because I love Herb, I love his work, but I knew what Stan was looking for. And then Tom made another suggestion. Another guy, he made sure while he was editor-in-chief had plenty of work, Steve Ditko. And I loved Steve. And even though Steve had long ago decided he never wanted to do another Spider-Man story, it was a real challenge for me when I was editing Spider-Man to find ways of giving work to Steve, because I wanted to work with him. How can I edit Spider-Man without working with the other co-creator as well, Steve Ditko? So annuals were usually my answer, where I could, do little backup features that Steve could draw. But Steve had a wry sense of humor, and he'd do these stories, and he knew that, we didn't have Spider-Man in it, but he'd point out a panel. He said, look, I want to be a newspaper, put the Daily Bugle.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I was like, very good, Steve. Why don't you just draw Spider-Man? But
He even drew Spider-Woman in a story I read.
yeah. So, but it was absolutely a great pleasure working with it. It was like, this is legendary. How can you edit Spider-Man and not want to, not be thrilled by working with Stan and John Romita and Steve Ditko, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we were looking for another artist, after the Herb Trimpe thing didn't work out, Tom suggested, wanting to keep Ditko busy, wanting to get Steve to do it. And I'm thinking, again, no offense to Steve, that's exactly not what Stan's looking for. But selfishly, am I going to turn down the opportunity to be in the same room with Steve Ditko and Stan Lee, before I leave Marvel? Great idea, Tom. So I called Ditko up, and he was, we had a good relationship. It wasn't, a surprise for him to get a call from me or anything like that. So, I was like, hey, Jim, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, hey, Steve, Stan Lee has an idea for a new project, and he'd like you to draw it. And then there was silence on the other end for just a little bit.
Oh.
And in my imagination, I'm imagining Steve with a thought balloon over his head. This is me, not Steve. But the thought balloon I wrote for Steve was, he's finally come crawling back. And, Steve was just very casual about it. He goes, yeah, sure. When do you want me to come in? Da, 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 da. And
This is a movie. This movie has to be made.
and sure enough, he came in. The two of them got along famously. You read all this stuff. This guy hates that guy. That guy. No, they had tremendous respect for each other. And if I have any regret, and I'll tell you why at the end here, is Stan lays out his pitch for the new thing. And first of all, it's something, like the whole idea of a post-apocalyptic is not something Steve likes. He wants, and he explains it. He's like, I don't want to do a story that shows, mankind is doomed in any way. I want to be a positive future. If you want to do a Star Trek type of thing like that, I'd be up for it. So he wasn't against the idea of doing something with Stan. It was that specific idea. So after, Steve explained why, and Stan was totally putting on the charm. He was going full court press with Steve. And, when Steve was speaking, he would be, using his hands to talk a little bit. And Stan would be,
you're just trying to show off those magnificent fingers of yours.
and, they're just, having fun with each other. I think they're enjoying it. And then Stan figures, Stan tends to be single-minded and focused. I want this guy, I want someone to draw this new project. But what the hell, it's Ditko. And he figured he'd go for broke.
Why don't we do another Spider-Man graphic novel? Think of all the money we
And Steve was like, he was very calm. He was like trying to explain it. He's like, no, and this is the reason he gave. He said, I don't think I could ever care as much about Spider-Man as I did before. And I totally understood that. But he was still open to other things. But at that point, Stan is like, okay, enough of this. But I think if I had been planning to stay at Marvel instead of thinking I'm going to be out the door in a few weeks, I could have talked them into doing something together, and they both would. It would have been like, let's work with what. Stan, forget this thing. You can still do that with your Brian Bolin, substitute, but. Ditko wants to do something, and just the two of you together would be a big thing. And he's like, all he's saying is make it something that's positive and he's being more than reasonable. But I wasn't thinking, and I was just like, I was just wallowing and being in the presence of these two guys. So I enjoyed it, but the experience, and what better way, to cap off my, time at Marvel, then leaving Marvel with a meeting with Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, and then starting a new job as editor-in-chief at Topps, where I started a new universe with Jack Kirby characters and working with Jack.
That's pretty cool.
Beautiful.
I wasn't in that meeting, but I think it must have started in the morning and then continued after lunch.
Something like that. Yeah, Tom came in, and when we were done, and then the two of them were floating around the office.
I said, my memory, I'm just sitting talking to somebody in the hallway in the bullpen, in the corridor in the bullpen. And I thought Ditko was just coming in for the first. I hadn't written it up. Anyway, Steve comes in, walks down, and he goes into your office. But where I was situated, I saw Stan's face. And after Stan's face lit up like he was seeing a long lost brother. You know,
It's true.
really-
Another Larry.
Yeah,
No, it was whenever whenever I talked to Jack about Stan or Stan about Jack, or when I was with Steve and Stan together, it was always, you could see the mutual admiration and respect. I mean, they worked together. They had good time. I think it was just tremendous misunderstandings, unfortunately. Sometimes, it's tricky. I mean, I remember once I was in an office where Steve Gerber and his then girlfriend were having an argument, and Dave Grapp and I were there. We're like trying to act invisible because we don't want to hear the personal stuff or anything. And then the woman leaves, and then it's quiet, and then Steve says, "It's hard to believe I majored in communication in college." And I think that's whether it's McCartney and Lennon, or Simon and Garfunkel, or Lee and Ditko, or Simon and Kirby. It's like these things happen, And who could say why? But usually they ultimately, in most cases, the people, when they talk about it years later, one of them's gone or something like that, you don't hear Paul McCartney saying anything bad about John Lennon or anything like that.
I just love that that was like the origin of Ravage that I ended up working on with Paul Ryan as the inker on that book. That's so wild. Thank you.
The sign of a great panel is that I got to maybe like 4 questions out of 20. They know you really got some juicy stuff. We'll have to do a part 2. I do want to note that Jim definitely gets the award for best Stanley impression. That was about saying. Yeah. He gets a note prize.
Well, I'll try to be quick. When I was working for Stanley Media out in California, they had Stan created a character called Stan 2.0, which would be animated on the web, and which I would, was Stan's evil clone. Maybe got the idea from the Clone Saga.
Sure.
And originally, Stan would write it himself, and then he would do the voice. And the company got so busy that originally it got to the point where Stan couldn't write it anymore, so he'd have me write it. And his only complaint occasionally would be, even though it was an evil clone, he didn't really want me to say anything bad about anyone because he said, I may want to work with them. So it's the not so evil clone. And then Stan got so busy that he couldn't do the voice anymore. And they were having a production meeting that I wasn't part of. And they were thinking they'd have to hire an actor to do Stan's voice. And some of the people in that meeting knew that I did this impression of Stan. But over the years, it's like the way a kid in school might do an impression of the teacher. They only do it behind their back. So they asked me after that meeting, would you be interested in doing the voice of the clone? And, sure, I guess. And he said, you have to audition for Stan. So I did. I was petrified, but he approved it. I passed the audition. I got to do it. But the reality is, I never really sound like Stan, but I know how to talk like him, especially considering it was for an evil clone. I was around Stan enough times when he would get angry, which the public would never see. And normally usually his exclamation would be, Jesus Christ! What's wrong with Fingeroth? That's
I think we have like 5 minutes for Q&A. So, any questions from the audience? That's great.
yes or no answers.
If you could do a crossover Spider-Man, any other comic character, who'd it be? Or will not Marvel anything?
Well, it would have to be Harvey Peacock. I think it would have to be Harvey Peacock, who created his own. Well, Harvey has teamed up with The Thing, in the past. I think Dean might have drawn Dean Haspiel, but yeah, I'd like to see just the two everyman guys solve some horrible conundrum in Cleveland or New York. So that's.
I would be the pulp character, the spider, who was sort
Who
of
would
like
you like to see?
who was sort of like Spider-Man Noir now.
Yeah, that's right.
Who would you like to see?
I wish Silk was more and more like
Keith, you
I already saw it. It was Superman, Spider-Man. That was great.
Right.
That was a great book. Loved that. Ross Andrews.
Woody Allen, that's Spider-Man.
So much to pack in that one.
If like a book, like say Invincible, was found, you're like, how from the inside?
Oh, good lord.
I like to think it's still my day, but
I hope I would do as good a job as they did.
well, I mean, Invincible seems like an update of Spider-Man is the template for that kind of. Right, I mean, I'm not the world's foremost Invincible expert, but it seems to me that the whole, it's a character who's a teenager who gets this power, and what do you do with it? How do you use it responsibly? That's.
But with a whole lot more blood and gore.
Right.
I'm thinking of two more characters I'd want to team them up with, but they're so obscure. I don't know if any of you would know. One was Brain Boy and Herbie.
Herbie.
Herbie's going to be the movies.
Yes.
He's going to become fake.
That's right.
Not Herbie the robot.
No, Herbie the Syrian.
Love
Oh, the Love Bug.
No, not the
No. Herbie, it was a American Comics. Was that there? Herbie was, you'll pardon he was called the Human Blimp or the Felt Fury.
that Herbie.
And he was looking at, he was probably like an autistic kid with superpowers who just kind of walked his way through all sorts of adventures and disasters.
He had a lollipop.
He had a lollipop, yeah.
That is Eddie Ward beanie and
American Comics Group, I think. Yeah.
classic character. Remember that.
I have a question lately for Jen. I was just reading the Hybrid Fawn and Spider-Man 16. I noticed that Todd would respond at Leonard's page to a fan. I noticed in parentheses there you wrote for contradict what he said and wanted. But you sure that was humor and good jest, or did you feel that maybe Todd could not have
No, I think Todd was always Todd. He was answering, very bluntly and honestly. And this may shock some, but that wasn't the normal style for the Marvel litter columns. It was almost like someone had to take the company line, and since I was an employee, I figured I'd compromise and try to do it as a way back when on 60 Minutes, they used to have point counterpoint. So I'd let Todd go first. That would be the real answer. And then I'd sort of like take the Marvel side. And then, Todd, you ignorant slut.
You say ignorant slut?
Yeah, that's what parody. When Dan
Aykroyd, Jane Kruger.
parodied,
That was great. Oh, yeah.
whatever Jane said first, Dan's response would be, Jane, you ignorant slut.
Amazing.
Doesn't read as well in 2025.
But you can't name how you know that.
But you'll probably see it on this. On
That's right.
50 years, it's Saturday Night Live anniversary special.
Yes.
So, quick. Yeah.
Since you work side by side with Steve Ditko, I know my
Not side by side.
yeah,
Far from that.
he's do you feel like that character Spider-Man was pretty much based on Steve Ditko in a lot of ways? Like I know, like some people, but a lot of people said that he was very, very intelligent. He was also a scientist.
My answer is yes and no.
Yes.
I think the key thing, if Steve left to his ultimate devices, I don't think he would have come up with Spider-Man.
Right.
I think with Stan, I think highly influenced by 50s sci-fi movies, like I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and teenage things was the big thing in the 50s. And so the idea of doing a teenage superhero was kind of crucial to what Spider-Man was and became. And
That included romance comics.
yeah, all that stuff. I mean, there's a lot of influences, but I think Steve was more, adult heroes. The exception being when he went to DC, he did Hawk and Dove. But I think that's the only other time he did teen characters, or Speedball, I guess.
I think Spider-Man was both of them.
That's what I'm trying.
Yeah. That's how I was asking. I feel like it was a combination of Stan and Steve together, that merge that happened.
And an understanding of coming from poverty and sort of the universal American high school experience, combined. I just think, of course, Steve eventually was the plotter of the entire thing, although I think they did actually collaborate early on. But, people go, there's a school of thought that's, he just filled in the word balloons. Well, filling in the word balloons sets so much of the tone and dare I say the vibe of a comic that I think even when they were not speaking to each other, I think there was just, my favorite is in the Master Planner saga, that 3-parter that has the lifting the giant pile of machinery. And at the end, Peter is all beaten up and he comes to see Jonah Jameson, to sell him the pictures. And Jonah is clearly, I think, Ditko's satire of Stan and of Martin Goodman, the publisher. And yet the dialogue is so much what Peter is so fed up and he's so almost died fighting all these goons of Dr. Octopus. And he says $100, and James said, it's highway robbery. Parker goes, take it or leave it. And Jameson's thought balloon is, who wised Parker up? It's like, oh my, and it's like, I don't know, did Steve write that in the margin? I don't know. Did Stan write it? Whatever it is, it's just, wow, here's Peter Parker has now become a grown-up, and has, and the character has taken such a turn. So the two of them, maybe it was good for the strip that they weren't talking, Whatever it was, it made for great comics.
No, that's incredibly insightful. This is just a minor footnote. Is like I would pay attention to what precious little interviews or articles that Steve himself would write. And one of the things he would say is, and even when he was working for me later at the Topps Comics, he was drawing Jack Kirby's superhero characters for me. Is he said he preferred to do his own characters. He didn't like doing, other artists' characters. And if you look at early Spider-Man, if Steve didn't like doing that, why would he come up with stories that would have the Human Torch in it, the Fantastic Four, the Daredevil, the Incredible Hulk? I mean, it was just constantly guest stars, which that's scam. Why don't we put, it was like, I think Stan may not have done more than say, insert this character, and maybe Steve came up with all the specifics of but it was just a matter of, at the time that method evolved just to keep all the artists working. He figured if you have Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and they're so good at plotting and all that, why do I have to type up a whole big thing when they could probably come up with something better, which would make it even more exciting for Stan, the script, when he's looking at what they gave him with their notes, and he would add his touch to it. So that's how they collaborated. And, it's one of these things that I agree with everything Danny said. It really was the two of them, that created that particular magic.
Yeah, that makes sense because I'm an artist and I have all kind of and I kind of work with my artists the same way. Like for my books in tonight, it's weird because we are it's against us. Literally, I don't have to tell what I want or we'll talk about it. I'll give him a little bit of script. He'll come back and do an improvise on my I was just thinking that. So yeah, I understand that. I think when you get to that certain, it's chemistry really is. Two people meet at that mic moment, they have the ideas, and everything you're supposed to hear.
Let's see what your artist says 30 years from now.
And his lawyer.
when the movie comes out.
Don't worry, you got to go over and
Folks, that's all the time we have.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more comic content. Check out these other videos for even more insight, and I'll see you at the next one. Excelsior.